Good afternoon. There you go. We're supposed to have fun here, right? And so thank you for all being here. Welcome. I'm Victor Zhao, the president of the National Academy of Medicine and the board member of Research America. You know, every year, first in the last few years, we have, this event here, the annual Advocacy Award for Research America. I would say to you, it's a highlight for us at Academy because it's not just staunch science and whatever, it's about fun and celebration of the great contribution of our leaders, scientific policy leaders, and so many others. So just so much, I want to welcome you. And today, of course, we have lots of special award winners, including Mary Woolley. I, for one, look forward to her speech to talk to us because she's done such a wonderful job leading us. So I think this is going to be an extraordinary event. And so let's get started. Please welcome me in joining on stage Dr. Sudha Parikh, who in fact, as you know, is the Research America board chair, but also the CEO of AAAS. And of course, he's also executive publisher of Science family of journals. And Sudeep, which you all know, is a great leader, and he'll preside over this meeting. But welcome, and I'll talk to all of you at reception. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you. And thank you to Marcia for letting us be in this wonderful place. The National Academy of Sciences, this building is a temple to science. It's a temple to science in the way that we build temples for other things, but this is an extraordinary place where we can look up at the ceiling in that wonderful central hall, and we can realize our aspirations of science, realize what it is that we're trying to accomplish with science, realize why we do the science that we do. So thank you again for letting us be here. Now, it's not a secret that we are living in some challenging times. And I want to tell you that, I'm suffering from a little bit of jet lag because I just got back from India. And I was there for the past week. And it was an extraordinary thing to be outside our country talking about science diplomacy, and how we have science as a common language for everyone. And to, at that same moment, have the United States be in a military action. And one of the things that I saw during that time is that, first of all, everyone recognizes what an extraordinary moment in science this is. The fact that we know more about the universe, the planet, and ourselves than ever before. Everyone recognizes that we're on the cusp of remarkable things, that we're on the cusp of being able to say things like not just treatment, but sometimes cure. The fact that we're able to say that is mind-boggling to me. The first time I participated in a Research America Awards dinner, I don't think we used the word cure. We didn't. We didn't think that was a real thing. And now we live in that kind of time. So that was recognized at this meeting that I was at. But then, what was also recognized is the challenges that are confronting us. The fact that it's getting harder and harder to do science around the world and collaborate. The fact that it's getting harder and harder to be able to chase exactly the idea that you want to chase. The fact that even though we would all celebrate a cure or a treatment for a disease like Alzheimer's, the fact that we might not be able to collaborate to make it come faster. Those things were all in the minds of the scientists I was around. But then the thing that really bothered me, was, as I talked to folks, they had a lot of empathy in previous years about the challenges that are facing American science. A lot of empathy. This year, I felt like that empathy was turning to anger. It's turning to anger. And that is not something I'm used to. I've been fortunate to be able to represent the United States or American organizations for over 26 years around the world. And they've never once said, wow, you're doing a great job. Never once. Never once did somebody say that about the United States of America. But they also would say things like, you know what, here's how we can work better together. Here's how we can work together to solve problems. And this time, I don't think they recognized that our aspirations were good. I worried that they no longer believed Churchill's quote, "The United States always does the right thing after trying everything else." I no longer believe that. And that worries me. That worries me. And so in a time like that, in a time when we are in the midst of trying to make sure that science continues to have the promise and the potential that we're all here for, the reason why this temple was built, that when you're doing that, I worry. And I think that we've got to get together and we've got to celebrate. We have to celebrate. We have to celebrate the efforts of our honorees. We have to celebrate the treatments. Celebrate the treatments that have been developed. Celebrate this extraordinary model of science that we've built in this country that has delivered extraordinary results for the American people. And so gatherings like this, gatherings like the Research America Advocacy Awards dinner of 2026 is something that we should cherish, something we should absolutely cherish. So I hope you all are going to cherish it tonight, and I hope that you have a lot of fun, as Victor said. And I can't wait to celebrate our honorees, including Mary Woolley. But first, I want to extend a special welcome to our Research America Alliance members. I want you all to know that you are absolutely critical to our important work advocating for medical and health research, for funding, and for right policies, for the good policies, creating the policy environment that drives innovation, discovery, and faster medical and health progress. I also want to thank you for sharing our commitment and support of the broad science enterprise. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize the current and former civil servants joining us here today. I think I speak for all of us when I say thank you. I see you in the room. Thank you. A round of applause is appropriate. I think I've finally let this thing catch up. All right. You can tell that I have some jet lag. A special thank you to our sponsors, especially our platinum sponsor, Johnson & Johnson, and our gold sponsors, Amgen and Pfizer. Thank you. Together, we're going to honor individuals and organizations whose leadership efforts have advanced our nation's commitment to medical, health, and scientific research. And so we're going to have another special thank you to our benefactors, Johnson & Johnson, the Whitehead Charitable Foundation, and the Whitehead Institute for Biomedical Research, the late Ann Lurie, the Gordon and Laura Gund Foundation, the late Herbert Pardes, and the Rosenfeld Heart Foundation. Now, these advocacy awards have been around for 30 years. 30 years, and the benefactors' support throughout that time has allowed us to shine an absolute spotlight on the value of scientific innovation and public health, and inspire the next generation of research advocates. And so, many thanks to everybody, our partners, our nominators. Please remember to nominate people for next year. Our previous honorees, our nomination committee, our board of directors, the wonderful guests in this room, and our esteemed honorees for helping to make today possible. Like I said, these kinds of celebrations are critical to everybody. Now, if you've been following our work online and in our alliance discussions, or through Mary's weekly letter, I know you all read Mary's weekly letter, you've seen the impact that this organization, Research America, has had on the research ecosystem. And of course, that in-the-moment work would not be possible without the support of generous organizations and individuals like you. And so while you're here with us this evening, I have to make my pitch now, while you're here with us this evening, I hope you'll consider making a gift to help us sustain and grow Research America's impact. Now, there's a QR code on the screen and in your program that you might use to donate, as well as information, including a pledge form in your program. It's important for us to honor the individuals that we salute this afternoon. Individuals who are driving innovation, advocating for progress, and making waves in the world of medical, health, and scientific research and innovation. And so even as we're all inspired by their accomplishments, we got to commit to supporting their future endeavors and those whom we will one day salute, those who are not yet here, but who we are going to be celebrating. So join us in supporting us. So thank you. All right, now Now you can get rid of me, and we can actually welcome to the stage the program that's going to be in front of you. I want you to welcome to the stage Research America board member, the Honorable Donna Shalala, former U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services, U.S. Representative, and all-time wonderful person, Donna Shalala, who's going to introduce our first panel.
Thank you, boss. I would like to acknowledge my Research America board members, colleagues, and the CEO and the honoree, Mary Woolley, of course, and of course the staff, which does so much to make this organization just outstanding. I'm pleased to be here this evening. Research America actually released its latest commission survey last month, and it found that an overwhelming majority of Americans, nearly 9 in 10, believe that it's part of a scientist's job to inform the public about their research and its impact on our society. And so our first panel, you'll find scientists and researchers who have excelled at just that. We will also hear from a journalist who has spent her career reporting accurate and truthful information about science and research. Everyone on this panel takes to heart the mission of building trust through accurate information. But before we meet the first panel, let's get to know all of our 2026 Advocacy Awards honorees.
For advocacy to be the most effective, it has to speak the language of everyone. How do we communicate what we are doing in ways that are salient and relevant to our audiences? I think this is an extraordinary time from many, many perspectives. But I also think that humans has this drive to help each other.
It is an important question as to what the role of young scientists might be in spending time on advocacy and on promulgating the results of their work. This is something that has energized and intrigued me over many, many years.
The scientists themselves also have to go beyond the lab. Science has to speak to the public, and it is not easy, for the public to perceive the importance and the benefit of science. So the advocacy has got to be in a way that the public can pick it up and understand it.
So when I think about the difference between science and advocacy, while they are not the same thing, they are linked to some extent. Science is it's the tool. It's what's going to get us the answers that we need to make people happier and healthier. And it's hard not to get behind that.
My writing has the most impact when I tell a good story and when I put the science into context. I just love the idea of being able to learn about science and then share it with the world. So every story is more interesting when diverse voices are represented. So seek them out, seek out a wide range. It'll make the story better.
The McClintock letters really aim to give members of the public who might not otherwise interact with the American scientific enterprise a chance to hear directly from scientists who are in their own communities about what it is that they're doing and why it's important.
There is an ongoing cultural shift in academia towards a need for better science communication with the public and for science advocacy with the public as a core of what we as scientists do.
Inclusion begins by listening to the communities, knowing the people that you're serving. One of the issues about science advocacy is if the specific field of science that you're trying to promote is of direct benefit to people, and that it's the humanity that's involved with developing protective measures and programs that is what really drives us.
I think anybody can participate in advocacy. What inspired me was a goal that I shared with two stars, two really outstanding individuals.
Dr. Oakley was a mentor to my mentors, and I've trained in the programs that Godfrey helped build and establish in the country. So all of that knowledge that Godfrey has helped create in the country has helped early career epidemiologists who are interested in birth defects like me.
I can see that organizations such as Research America have an important role to play. The advocacy of health benefits, the promotion of scientific research is, I believe, a societal priority.
Our advocacy for the 100 Days mission, the being able to create new vaccines in response to new threats within 100 days, we have found to be a goal that unifies. People get excited and energized by that goal. They want to contribute to it. That brings a sense of momentum, a sense of urgency, a sense of collective ownership.
I'd invite my panelists to come up. I am Kirsten Bibbins Domingo. I'm a relatively new board member for Research America, and this is my first event like this, and it's been really fun to see all of you out there, to meet so many people who are excited about our shared mission. I am particularly excited to moderate this panel today, not just to hear from the individuals who are on this panel about their specific accomplishments, but also to learn from them about how we might all do this better. These are, of course, superstars in their field. I am going to start at the end with the introductions. We're honoring Dr. Erin Carroll, President and CEO of Academy Health, Dr. Nicole Laurie, U.S. Director of the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, or CEPI, Dr. Amy Maxman, a National Public Health Correspondent at KFF Health News, Isako Izzy DiTomasi, PhD candidate from the School of Integrative Plant Sciences at Cornell University, and Dr. Grayson Brown, Executive Director of the Puerto Rico Vector Control Unit. Welcome, honorees. Please, round of applause. All right. Yes, I see the flag. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So you are all incredibly accomplished at engaging the general public, engaging government institutions, engaging your peers, and that is why we're honoring you today. You're doing this against the headwinds of rising public mistrust in expertise in general, in science in particular, misinformation, disinformation. And so I think we'd all want to learn about the specifics, but also in general, how we can all be doing this a little bit better. So I'm going to start with a general question for all of you, and I'm going to go down the line, which is, you're all at the height of doing this well, but we'd like to encourage more scientists, and we believe there's a responsibility for scientists and those who are engaged in research to engage in public discourse. What's your best pitch for why we should be doing this? Erin, I'm going to start with you.
I think the best pitch for why is because without that, science just sits on the shelf and it doesn't actually do any good. Our organization is all for the creation and use of data and evidence to improve health and healthcare for all. And without the use, it doesn't really matter. And I think too many scientists, think at the end that they publish the work, maybe they present it and then they can move on. But it's so important to be able to talk about it in ways that other people will understand, the public will understand, and certainly policymakers will understand. Because without it, we're never going to be creating that policy which we hope will make the world a better place.
Vicki?
Scientists are usually trusted messengers. I think that trust carries with it a set of obligations. Yes, absolutely, to go beyond the lab and to talk with the public, to talk with individuals, but also really, I think, a responsibility to make it really understandable, really usable, bring it home. I think it's a challenge for many scientists to learn to speak beyond the lab. Many of us growing up were taught that the kind of speaking to the public, to the media, to Congress as advocacy was somehow dirty. We got to get over that. It is absolutely essential to what we do to make change, whether it's to get funding for our work or whether it's to put our work to good use really anywhere in the world. And frankly, I think it's a skill that we have to teach more scientists. Amy.
People will find answers. And if it's not from scientists and people with a knowledge of science, it's going to be from somewhere on the internet, probably the AI answer. So it's good to start using your conversations in your voice to explain things to people, even if it's not your own expertise, because then you'll be someone that people can come to when they have questions, which they will. Which isn't to mention the point about taxpayer funding paying for science, and that therefore you have an obligation to deliver to the people that are paying for it.
Good. Yeah, actually, I would really say that as someone whose work is very often funded by taxpayers, uh, it's kind of really important for us as scientists, federally funded scientists, to think of ourselves as public servants and to really realize that when you're talking about your science and your work to the public, you're kind of talking to your boss, really explaining like why it is that they're paying your salary and giving you the money that they are. Um, so yeah.
Right.
Thank you very much. Uh, yeah, I view advocacy in two categories. On the one hand, we need to advocate science to the general public because so many of the scientific aspects that we try to implement throughout the society require public buy-in. We run into problems with vaccine hesitancy and those types of issues that impede the penetration of science into the public life. And in my field, vector control, try convincing people in drug cartel controlled barrio to accept a mosquito truck driving through their area spraying poison everywhere. It's a tough place to deal business. That's one aspect, and then the other aspect of advocacy is finding people that will fund it, finding organizations that will fund it. And funding right now is all of us here, everyone in this room know that it's a big challenge. And the problem with the funding is not just getting funding to start a program, but it's keeping it going, particularly when there's not a severe challenge. So in our case, when we don't have an epidemic going on within an island of Puerto Rico, then funding just dries up. And then you have to start up all over again from scratch at the next one.
Right. We're going to come back to that a little bit more. So, Amy, let me start with you. You're now on the receiving end. All of us are going to be better communicators. How do you sort through to figure out what's valid when you're trying to report on the massive amounts of science that's published, on people who have their own airways to tell you about things? How do you sort through what you're actually going to report on, what is actually valid?
Well, I mean, honestly, it's mainly from talking with people. So I'm in a really privileged, this is a wonderful field because I get to just talk with experts like many people in this audience and have conversations about one that helps my own understanding. And then, time only allows you to do so much. So then it's a toss up between what's newsworthy, what are my colleagues covering, what isn't being covered, what fits within my beat. So there's a lot of kind of small things that might fit into that metric when I decide what to talk about. I would say if you're a scientist and you're thinking about how do I get heard more, you can always reach out to me or reach out to many journalists that if you like somebody's writing or it seems like somebody's covering a topic that yours is adjacent to or something, reach out to the reporter. It's also great to be a member of scientific societies or medical societies or foundations, groups like Research America, because sometimes I'll reach out to organizations And not only talk to maybe like the director of those organizations, but I'll say, do any of your members, do you know any scientists who might be able to speak to this? So then they'll have a sense of who's there and who's willing to talk. So that's a good way to kind of get your voice out there. And then as far as learning to communicate better, honestly, I think the best thing is just to try just to start and just start doing it often just by talking with people. And that can be, friends or family members or at a bar or a restaurant, people who aren't scientists, and just pay attention to when they're bored and to when they're excited. When they're excited, that's going to be the thing you're going to start with next time. So you'll kind of work on your bit. That'll be the thing you'll start with. And when they're bored, maybe you cut it, maybe you make it shorter, maybe you think of a new way to explain it. I moved from science to journalism, and I think part of it was realizing the things that I thought were interesting as a scientist aren't always so interesting to the public, but maybe the general topic was, or a piece of it was.
Yeah, it sounds like it's very good advice. So you're saying I can reach out to you directly. That's good advice. But I think that's something that scientists generally have to overcome is the idea that there's some barrier there and that they could reach out directly and start to engage.
To be honest, I love that more than 99% of the time. Press releases aren't going to do it. That's not the thing. But an email that's like, this thing just occurred to me. Can we talk? That might work.
That's really, really great advice. So, Erin, your organization really ramped up external communication. Talk to me, but from an organizational standpoint, what were you seeing around you? How did you think about organizationally what you had to do in this environment, and why did you choose the external communication bit?
It was just over a year ago, I think we all sort of felt the bottom drop out in a variety of different ways from the scientific endeavor in the United States. And we would look at all of our members and continually hear over and over that they weren't getting a lot of information, that they weren't being told what they might be able to do, that the sort of default was to be quiet and keep your head down. And this left a lot of people in science and in research not knowing what to do. And internally, I was noticing that so many of our staff members were putting together internal memos talking about what exactly is going on, what's going on in the Hill, what's going on in the executive branch, what's going on in the NIH, what's going on in ARC, and trying to take concrete steps about how could we react to that. And it just struck all of us that, well, this information is so valuable to us. This information is obviously going to be valuable to others. And it was important to us not to keep our head down, but to really try to accurately describe what we saw going on and what we thought scientists could do about it. We noticed very quickly that the emails that we were sending out, which we later called the situation report, were getting a lot more uptake than our usual communication. And so we leaned in and we made sure that we were constantly updating our members and anyone who wanted to hear, meaning the public at large, about what we thought was going on and what we thought people could do about it. And people were very hungry for that.
So, talk a little bit about how you maybe a strategy that worked, and then how you could figure out whether a particular communication strategy was working or not working, and how that might have evolved over the last year.
I think it's a lot of trial and error. People don't really understand that, those who seem to be good at science communication were not born that way. It's practice. If you want to get good at the piano, you have to practice the piano. If you want to get good at basketball, you must play a lot of basketball. And if you want to be good at science communication, you got to be willing to really try and try new things and see what works and see what doesn't, and then change and learn from what you hear. I think a lot of it was we tried a number of different things. Some worked well, some did not. That's okay. But people were hungry for anything. I mean, I think just even acknowledging what was going on and trying to give people some validation in that went a long way. But there is no question that doing something matters and trying matters. And I was incredibly proud about how Academy Health was willing to step up and be honest in a nonpartisan, non-confrontational way about these are the things that are happening. This is why it matters, not just to researchers, but to the American public and to people and what we can do about it.
It's very interesting, Amy, and you were saying the same thing. So we just have to step in and try to do this. Grayson, you have the challenge of trying to communicate to community members. If you're going to be successful, as you said, you have to go sometimes in um, areas that are very different from the office that you work in, I assume, to communicate to people who are going to be affected by the particular epidemic of the moment. Describe some of the strategies that you've adopted in that environment and how they've worked. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. Dengue is well known to be primarily a disease of concentrated poverty. And so that's where the disease is. So you've got to go there. Those areas tend to be not just poor, but very high crime, often controlled by drug gangs. You have to get in there and find out who is controlling the given area, whether that's the local administration or the drug cartels or both, and you have to understand what's going on with them. And in the case of something like dengue, even the hardest drug cartel warlord has kids in there, and it mostly is pediatric cases that we deal with. So they will generally be willing to accept us in there, especially because we're a nonprofit organization. We're not part of the government. So we don't have we're not police. You don't have to worry about us being a police. So we get in there and get connect with the leadership and get them personally involved. We organize community groups to help uh, work our traps, our surveillance traps, hand out our literature, work with the communities in town hall meetings and small fairs. We get the cities to get in there and clean up the trash, replace the dumpsters. That's a big problem. Power wash the gutters around the buildings, and we can drive dengue down in those little spots. And we find that when we do that, that prevents spread or reduces spread anyway of dengue throughout the island. We just finished a big outbreak. We had almost 7,000 cases in the island. But in previous outbreaks where our unit didn't yet exist, the number was more like 20 or 30,000. So we're making progress doing that primarily by engaging with the communities at the poorest, most crime ridden, concentrated poverty areas on the island. Is very effective.
How do you find the partners within those communities? Who do you work with more directly, or how do you figure
Great
that out?
question. That's a great question. You first of all need to get past the guards. There's a guard. Usually, when you go in there, there's going to be a guy with a pistol or a rifle and and a walkie-talkie, and you talk to him. We have been doing this enough now so that we have a degree of street cred. Our vehicles are very brightly marked and recognizable throughout the island, and so we work our way in bit by bit. Start off with him, and then go up to the next his lieutenant, and then eventually we get to the administration of the of what we call them the residencial, the public housing complexes, and then from there we organize meetings with the individual residents, and then we go door to door. And it's actually the door-to-door work that's most important. The mosquito that transmits those diseases doesn't fly very far. It's not a good flyer. So it's the people themselves that are rearing the vectors that are transmitting the disease, and the disease is rampant in those tiny little places.
And you're describing with dengue, but certainly with many of our communicable diseases, it's
All
those
of it is
communities.
all you're exactly right. Influenza, mycoplasma, you name it, right on down the line. It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Hey, very good. So I'm hearing again, sort of the message that's resonating with your audience. In your case, no matter where we come from, we care about the health of our children, and that is the starting point into the set of things.
That's the key. That's a key thing, at least for us, especially when you're dealing with a problem where people are the older people anyway are pretty much set in their ways. They're not gonna. There's a degree of response fatigue that builds in that develops with them older people, I guess. at least in those areas. And so they tend to think, well, I've been through an outbreak of this or that disease before. I'll make it through the next one. But if you say, well, listen, that little 5-year-old hasn't, and it can kill him or her, and it does. And so that's the key to getting past that.
So, Nikki, maybe you can talk a little bit about CEPI. You're dealing with public-private partnerships to try to also think about pandemic preparedness, vaccine delivery, and vaccine development. Talk a little bit about an example of convening these types of multi-stakeholder towards that common goal.
Well, let me give you an example that I think is really interesting. As you heard from Richard on the screen, CEPI put together and adopted this idea of the 100-day mission, that we should be able to have a vaccine emergency authorized and ready for use in 100 days. And many countries around the world, especially developed countries, have adopted that mission. Well, Rwanda was the first uh, lower middle income country and the first country in Africa to want to adopt the mission and asked us to help them figure out how to do it. We worked with Rwanda for about a year, with them in the lead, but pulling together the partners who did surveillance, who might have done wastewater surveillance, who ran labs, who did vaccine development. We've been supporting the construction of a vaccine manufacturing facility in Rwanda. We brought clinical researchers together and talked about how you get a clinical trial up and running quickly. We brought the regulators to the table, and they all worked out over the course of the year how each of them were essential, how they all had to work together, how they had to work together with the public. And at the end of that year, we went to Rwanda and we did a day and a half long tabletop exercise about a hypothetical disease, and we practiced that whole scenario. We all went home. We went to the meeting of the United States General Assembly, United Nations General Assembly, and 10 days after we were all home, we got a call from the health minister of Rwanda. Richard got a call to say, we have a presumptive positive diagnosis of somebody with Marburg disease. We'll probably have to go public in the next day or two. Can you help? And let me tell you, all the partners sprang into action. The partners who were on the ground there. And we had been working with a couple of manufacturers who had not been part of that exercise at all. One of them was the Sabin Vaccine Institute, located here, that had an advanced vaccine candidate funded by the US government, funded by BARDA. We had worked with them before. We called them up. We were mobilized, the core response partners mobilized in about 24 hours. And within 10 days, we had a clinical trial up and running on the ground, through which the Rwandan Health Ministry was able to offer an experimental vaccine to its healthcare workers, because they'd already lost 6% of their healthcare workers by the time we got there. And within about a month, they were able to vaccinate about 1,700 healthcare workers with this experimental vaccine, bringing all the partners together. A couple of other things that are worth talking about. One is that the health minister was on the radio and television and the news every single day, talking to people about what was going on with the outbreak, what they were doing to control it. And I'll say it was a little bit of a challenge to help people understand this was an investigational vaccine. We didn't know if it was going to work. This is what the science part is about. But we were able to get there at the end of the day. And we were also able to communicate that once we get through the life-threatening emergency, we also had to do the best we could scientifically to design a trial that might provide more information. But we got a lot of safety and efficacy data out of that trial, are able to move that vaccine forward in development. It could not have happened had all the partners not been at the table, had not all the partners develop the trust, and frankly, had not all the partners practice. Aaron talked about practicing communication. One of the things we find over and over and over again is the more we practice and the more we practice with partners, the more trust we have, and the faster we get going. Now, just a couple months ago, there was another Marburg outbreak in Ethiopia. What happened? The first thing that happened is the Ethiopians called the Rwandans and they said, "What did you do?" And people from Rwanda went and helped. The second thing, there was a bit of a global consultation, and then they called us and they called Sabin Vaccine Institute and said, "Would you help us set up a trial?" And we said, "We will do this as long as it can produce scientifically valid information." And again, the partners worked together to get this done. It took a little longer than 10 days. It might have taken 2.5 weeks, but we got it up and running and got going, and we're just at the tail end of that now. And we'll be going to Ethiopia in a couple of weeks to do a lessons learned session. So the scientists across the board, the scientists working with government, the scientists working with community, all talk to one another so they can do it better and maybe even by themselves the next time.
It's such a great example. Let me push a little bit though on the time we're in right now. Coming out of the big global pandemic, one might think we would all like to plan again for the future, but there also has seemed to be a little bit of we're over that and we're loath to plan again for the future. So, how do we think about bringing convening now for threats that might be in the distant future, but we have to prepare for?
I think it's a great question. And I might say that, we started out hearing that things look really different outside the US than inside the US. And I think there are a number of countries outside of the US that are very much planning for their future. They have all wanted now to do 100-day mission exercises with us. They want to plan for the future, and there's a lot of convening around that. CEPI has just launched its 3.0 strategy. We have a big replenishment effort underway. So we need to convene governments around the world with the hope that they will make an investment in CEPI. It's going to be the same with the US government. In the US, the situation is a little bit different, but I don't think it is at all hopeless. I think there are a couple things operating. One is we all know it's really politicized right now. And there's, not a lot of trust in science in a lot of places, but it is very possible to have conversations with people and people who think really differently than you do. If you don't go lecture at them and say, "Hey, I'm right," if you don't politicize it, but if you try and meet them where they are, it turns out if you have a conversation with people, you can find out what they're curious about. You can find out what they think. And sometimes you're pretty surprised about what they think, but they often very much trust you as a doctor or a scientist if you don't preach at them, if you meet them where they're at to do this. And some of my colleagues at CEPI who are back there and I have been spending a lot of time on Capitol Hill, right? Doing this with our elected representatives and their staffs. And it's really interesting because you can in these conversations dispel a lot of misconceptions. You can make what you're doing, stopping these scary outbreaks, keeping them at bay, doing these things really relevant to them, and you can get them on board.
And the specific issue of vaccine development during this time, are you seeing any reluctance to get on board for that issue?
Well, obviously, there's a lot of craziness going on, particularly right now with mRNA. But we can talk about the fact that we need all kinds of platforms for all different kinds of diseases. I don't think the issue has been so much about vaccine development, it's been much more about policy and whether you make people take a vaccine that they don't want or make them wear a mask because you don't want to do it. We're not about making policy. We are about translating that science into the tools that can stop an outbreak, that can stop an epidemic. We learned today we're not supposed to say pandemic, but stop an epidemic, um, and keep diseases at bay. And there's still an awful lot to be said for that. I also find, again, like whether it's during flu season or winter time, you can often talk to people. And I think we just heard this from Grayson. Do you have kids? Do you have grandkids? Do you have a pregnant granddaughter? Has she been vaccinated? Has she gotten her RSV vaccine? Here's how you get to have a healthy grandchild. And you can really, really personalize this stuff. And then with the next set of questions, back up to provide scientific information, not on a lab level, but on a level that meets them and that they can understand. And so far, that's been pretty effective. Nobody's told us not to make vaccines. They've told us not to make vaccine policy. It's not what we do.
Good. All right, Izzy, I'd love to hear from you. So, this is quite a big initiative to start in graduate school. Uh, I'm wondering, did you get any pushback? You're a graduate student. You're supposed to be focused on your research. You've taken on this other big project. Tell me what the reaction was for those around you in taking this on.
Yeah, so I guess pushback in as far as like, did my PI give me pushback? I would say I kind of didn't really tell her about it until we started until we were contacted by the New York Times and like interviewed by them and until we were getting a lot of
Yes.
really positive publicity. As far as getting participation from other scientists and from different scientific societies, I would say, well, a little bit too, for those of you who might not know, the McClintock Letters Initiative was a science communication initiative in which we got over 600 scientists across the US from all different disciplines, mostly early career researchers, but there were also plenty of, faculty members and later career researchers too, to pledge to write letters to op-eds, for their local hometown papers. And we had over 300 scientists that we trained in op-ed writing workshops and science communication workshops all across the country. These were held in person and on Zoom. And we got over 200 pieces published all across the US in 45 states, also Puerto Rico and DC. And so I would say it was generally very well received. Most of the scientific societies that we reached out to ask them, hey, can you tell your members about this initiative? Your members, we kind of also tried to frame it as like, hey, your members want opportunities right now to participate in science communication. Please share this opportunity with them. That was kind of how we framed the ask, right? And we got a lot of positive response to that. And they were like, oh, this is terrific. We'll send this out on our listservs. We did really surprisingly get just a very small handful of responses from some orgs that were like, this doesn't seem appropriate for something that we don't want to share this kind of political thing with our members. And we were like, hold on, I'm sorry. It's really, really unfortunate that you think encouraging your members to communicate their work, their federally funded work with the public is too political. That's really unfortunate. But yeah, I would say, and also, we actually, one part of a lot of the letters too was what we called our local supporting science pledge, which was we actually had a lot of people include a little link so that, community members who were reading these pieces could actually give feedback on the article that they read. And we had a lot of people say like, oh, it was so cool, learning about, why starfish, behave the way that they do, or we had one person who reached out who read a letter and said, I run a senior citizen home, and I would like to know if the person who wrote this letter could please come and give a talk, at our like learning lunch series. We got a lot of really great feedback, from non-scientists who read these pieces who said that, they loved them. And a lot of them also rated on our kind of little feedback form that it did make them more interested in reaching out to their representatives to advocate for science funding. So, yeah.
Why did you decide on this form for encouraging scientists to communicate?
Yeah, well, okay, so there was this other initiative called Science Homecoming that had started before us, and they really were targeting like later career researchers, who were publicly funded by like the NIH and stuff. And we were like, well, let's try to get early career researchers to participate as well. Let's get everyone to participate, with any funding sources, and let's use local newspapers because they actually a lot of people actually still read them. So actually, local newspapers have a much more diverse readership than the New York Times and the Washington Post. And we just want to make sure that
everybody's Aunt Sally and Uncle Jim, can read about the really cool work that, their tax money is going to fund. So, yeah, it was just one way to reach a lot of people who might not necessarily, get a chance to interact with scientists in any capacity, to hear directly from them. And also, having people reach out to their local hometown papers or papers from communities that they, had some kind of connection to was a really another really great way to get people to, recognize the humanity of scientists. When we hear about these, federal funding cuts and all of these federal researchers losing their jobs, it was really easy for a lot of people who probably didn't know scientists to be like, oh, well, you know, so what? What were they even doing? You know, well, now they get a chance to learn what scientists who are from their communities actually do. So, yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left, so this is your chance to give us some more advice, and we can start where whoever wants to start first. There must be things that you watch others do, scientists, clinicians that you'd like them to unlearn, or there must be people who are reluctant that you would be like, oh, you should get over that misconception because if only you would do this, you'd be very successful because all of us can do this. So, what are your pet peeves or what's your advice to those of us to get more involved? Okay.
Yeah, one thing that I would like my colleagues, my peers around the United States to do is have a less reliance on single technology approaches to problems, and really they need to increase their community engagement. Now, our unit has been about one third community engagement from the beginning, and in most of the programs around the United States, really in the world, there's no more than one or two people in community engagement. Like I said, you absolutely have to have public buy-in for any kind of at least an infectious disease, for gosh sakes, and there's just not enough emphasis on engaging the community in the approach that's going to be used within that community to address whatever the problem is.
So we need more. All right.
Oh, yeah. I'd like to actually just do a small callback to something that Amy had mentioned earlier, about, just generally being more involved in the community and, representing yourself as a scientist. So I wanted to say that, one thing, it doesn't necessarily also have to be a huge time commitment to participate in science communication, and it can also be in very informal settings when you're out having a drink at your local dive bar, talking to somebody about your research, and talking to them about the work you do and how cool it is in accessible terms. Um, and also when it comes to things such as addressing misinformation. Even if you are having a conversation with your Lyft driver about climate change and you were not able to uh, adequately convey to them, how what a crisis climate change actually is, and they might still walk away thinking that it's a hoax. Something that really matters at the end of that exchange is that they just had a positive encounter and interaction with a scientist in real life. So even if, again, they walk away thinking that climate change was a hoax, they just talked to a scientist in real life and they were able to engage with you as a person in a respectful way.
Excellent. Aaron.
I think we have to get over the way we were trained to talk about science as scientists and recognize that it doesn't work. I think as scientists, we're trained to talk only about the stuff we did with our own two hands. Most people don't care. Um, we're also, when we write papers, we're taught the methods are what matters, the results are what matters. Don't really pay attention to the introduction and the conclusion, just don't go too far. No one cares. They want to know, why is this important? They want to know, why should I care? What do we know already? What might you do? Why are you interested in this area? What's been done before? What do we do with this? All of the stuff that we're trained not to talk about as scientists is the stuff that resonates with people. And I think learning to talk differently, learning to talk to regular people people who are not scientists about why they should care and why what you do and what others do matters is critically important.
I would really echo a lot of what Aaron just had to say. And a lot of people have had the experience of like, try to explain this to your mother. And after you explain it to your mother, maybe you can explain it to someone else. I actually spend a lot of time talking to my kids, and I ask them, why, how do I communicate to your generation? What would resonate with them in terms of why this is important, why they should care? um, Again, they don't necessarily care about the technical parts of this, but why is this going to matter? What would they be curious about that I could hook them on so that we could have a conversation? Once the conversation starts, it's pretty good, but I need to know what they're curious about and where they're at to have that conversation. And so I practice with my family members, I practice with their friends, I practice with my peers in the office, and I want my peers in the office also just to be able to get over their anxiety and not necessarily talk about protein folding, but talk about why it is that what we do is going to matter for somebody's life.
Excellent. Amy?
Agree with everything. But then just to also, the final thing I think I would say is when people think about, when people believe about misinformation, often it's because of mistrust. And often there's a good reason for people to mistrust scientists or the medical establishment or doctors. Often it has nothing to do with the kind of solution they've come to, but they'll listen to misinformation because of mistrust. And often you can relate to that. Like, I loved hearing about what happened in Puerto Rico. Like, for example, if people mistrust the government, there might be very good reasons for them to mistrust the government. There's often very good reasons for people, so you can even show compassion for that reason. Um, and that kind of shows respect and unites you with that person. And then maybe you can have a discussion about, the piece of misinformation that might actually harm their lives, which maybe you can inform a little bit more. And I love this community engagement sort of. I think that's whenever I've heard, people just sort of say with dismay these regions, pockets of under vaccination, well, people just don't want to do it. Well, I've been to DRC and Congo, and I've seen, you know, health workers go into communities that are held by rebel forces. We just heard about what Grayson had to say. People do incredible work by just having community engagement as just conversations with people. So I think that's where it's at.
Fantastic. That's where it's at. All right. Please, a round of applause for these great awardees.
All right. Do you feel that? I just want to take a little temperature check. Do you feel a little bit of the weight coming off your shoulders as you listen to these honorees? Do you feel a little bit of the weight to stand up straighter because of the work that they've done? I hope you do, because I certainly do. I certainly feel that. And you're going to feel it even more as we get to our second panel of honorees. So this next panel is going to provide us all with much needed insight and perspective. And it's now my pleasure to turn the microphone over to the moderator of this great panel, Dr. Arthur Evans. Arthur is the Chief Executive Officer of the American Psychological Association. He's a Research America board member, and he's my friend. He's going to moderate our next discussion.
Hello. How are you? Okay, I'm very excited about this panel. These are some incredible people who've done some incredible things in their careers. And this is going to be a master class on how you navigate and get things done, even if it takes a long time, that are going to make a real difference. And so I'm very thrilled to be doing this panel. Before I introduce the panel, I do want to take a moment to honor someone who embodied persistence more than almost anyone in public health. That's Dr. Godfrey Oakley, who, along with two of our panelists, Sir Nicholas Wald and Dr. Richard Johnston, is a recipient of Research America's 2026 Building the Foundation Award. Dr. Oakley passed away in October of last year at the age of 85. He spent 30 years as director of the Division of Birth Defects and Developmental Disabilities at the CDC, and then another 2 decades at Emory University. We're honored to have Dr. Oakley's protege, Dr. Vijaya Kancherla, who now directs the Center for Spina Bifida, prevention at Emory, carrying forward his life's work, and most importantly, his family who is here. And so, could we recognize Dr. Oakley for his tremendous work? So let me introduce our panel. We have Sir Nicholas Wald, Professor of Preventive Medicine at University College London's Institute of Health Informatics, Dr. Richard Johnston, Emeritus Professor of Pediatrics at University of Colorado School of Medicine and National Jewish Health, Dr. Nora Volkow, who is the Director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, where she has spent 23 years, Dr. Arthur Rubenstein, who is the Dean Emeritus of the Perelman School of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania and Professor of Medicine in the Division of Endocrinology, Diabetes, and Metabolism, and Dr. Gerald Chan, who is the co-founder and chairman of the Morningside Group. Dr. Chan is a scientist by training with a doctorate in radiation biology from Harvard. So I'm going to start with Dr. Volkow, and because it is fairly widely known that your early influences, your early family influences, has helped to shape your career. And just wondering if you could maybe talk about that. And actually, I want all of the panelists to talk about what were some of the early career or the early life experiences that shaped who you became as a professional, as a leader, and how has that shaped your work? And so we'll start with Dr. Volkow.
Not expecting, and it is and we asked all our that's question that we all ask ourselves, and we try to come up with a narrative that makes sense, right? And but how many things influence us? And I definitively, when I think about it, I was born in Mexico, and I was born in a family that had been persecuted by the Russian Revolution. My father was a grandson of Leon Trotsky, and they had to emigrate into Mexico because it was the only place that gave them political asylum. But it cost basically the family an enormous toll. I mean, the family was decimated except for my father, who was the only survivor, and then us. And so from growing up in Mexico, it made me aware about how important it is to devote your life to make the life of others better. And I think that did made a big impact on me, and to a certain extent led me to choose medicine as a field. And then on the field of medicine, I was taken by the importance of psychiatry, because it is one of the most stigmatized diseases, psychiatric diseases, and and so and within them, addiction. I mean, people that are addicted are among the most vulnerable of our population. And so I've driven to try to do with my life something that can help others. So I think that's what I would answer to you, but you're surprising me with this question.
Okay, but you are good on your feet, so you did a great job. So, how about Dr. Johnson? Or go ahead, Sir Nicholas.
First of all, it's not part of your question, but I'd like to pay tribute to one of the individuals that was awarded this prize, Godfrey Oakley, who was instrumental at getting folic acid fortification in the United States. His activities, together with Dick Johnson to my right and me on the periphery in terms of implementation, but those two really made a massive achievement in the prevention of terrible birth defects. Now, to answer your question, I think the first out of professional experience is try and join a unit or department with people that have broken ground and advanced knowledge. It's where you should go as a young person. Look around and not just choose the first place that might be offered, but join a powerful and productive group. Two, and I say this with some sadness, is that in the 70s and 80s, doing clinical research, epidemiological research, clinical trials, was relatively easy. People cooperated and it was not too complicated. It has become massively bureaucratic. So I suppose I enjoyed a honeymoon when things were easier, but there needs to be a correction on this if it's to encourage young people to go into science, particularly clinical science and public health science. The other thing I've kind of learned, much perhaps to the annoyance of others, is you have to be bold and persistent. Some people would say a pain in someone's something or other. Things won't just happen. And when you do research that's worthwhile, you just wait 10 minutes before other people say, oh, you haven't got it quite right, and you didn't do this, and you only did it in America, and will it apply in Britain? So persistence. And the other is the importance of collaboration. You can do much more as a team than you can just on your own. And people should join with that. Now, having said that, a lot of productive and important research languishes. No EU country has introduced folic acid fortification to prevent neural tube defects. This is the work that was key to this was published in 1991. It's appalling, this gap between research and implementation. Advocacy is essential in this. And I agree there should be advocacy from the researchers, although some people would say researchers become biased if they just advocated their own research. I think that's a debating issue. I don't think it's necessarily right, and often the researchers will know much more than commentators. But this gap between research and implementation has got to be shortened. It's decades at the moment. What can we do about it? It's a suggestion. There are a lot of senior people in this room. Is there needs to be an agency that has executive powers and funding that could look after implementation on pilot projects. There's a lot of resources in research, massive amounts in clinical medicine, but this gap needs to be filled between the science and the implementation. And it'll probably have to be publicly funded, but it's interesting that even the FDA acts in responsive mode. We need an organization that can act in proactive mode. I think those are the key things, I suppose, or some of the key things that I've derived from my experience, which is your question.
Great, thank you. Dick?
I was going to try to avoid talking about myself, but I've asked to do that. I started out next door to my grandfather, and he was raised on a little farm in Indiana. And he became one of the leading lawyers in developing Atlanta in the 20th century. But he retired to a kind of semi-farm. And so when he would go out of town, I would take care of 500 chickens. And what I learned is you got to work hard if you're going to have something to eat. As I got older, I worked at a YMCA day camp and worked with kids up through about sixth grade. And I taught swimming. And then at the end of the day, I'd go down to the pool and teach swimming till it was too dark to do otherwise. And I found out how rewarding it is to work with children and teach. So I found out two things. I found out I liked it, and I like kids. Same doctor. Didn't work. And if is that better? You missed all that stuff.
You got to start over. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Um, and if you take a little 3-year-old, 3 to 4-year-old, who hates his mother because she's bringing him to swim, he doesn't want to get wet, but he goes down in the water, and you finally get him to put his head under the water, and he puts his head finally, and he comes up with a huge smile, and that is real success. And I think it's an example of working with kids. When I got to med school, kids didn't want to be sick. I like that part of it. It was just fun. It was fun to work with kids. So I went through training, and I was coming along in a period when subspecialization was just coming into the fore. So I was told you have to subspecialize. And then I was told, then I decided that academia had more to offer me because of the new ideas that were coming along all the time, new ideas, new ways of thinking and working through problems. And so I decided on immunology. I decided then for 3 years of basic research, and came out doing a lot of research. And then as time went on, I was offered an opportunity to be president of this and that and the other. And so there was the opportunity, my first opportunity for advocacy. And I think all of us probably in the audience belong or will belong as they mature to some kind of organization that they believe in. And so you right away, you've got a group you can work with, and you have shared passion. And so I had a couple of opportunities in that regard to change the organization and making it achieve what it really wanted to do anyway. So then I still had an NIH grant, but I went to work for the March of Dimes to get back to my basic roots, which were children. March of Dimes targets are prematurity and birth defects, two largest problems in at least young pediatrics. And so I went back to my roots while I still had an NIH grant. And then I had an opportunity again to find something that really I believed in. And I had the opportunity to pull it together with Nick and with Godfrey.
Yeah, and I want to come back to the two of you in a moment because your collaboration is really tremendous. Gerald.
Well, I grew up in the 1950s in Hong Kong. That's where I was born and raised. And in 1957, two young Chinese physicists won the Nobel Prize. That was T.D. Lee and C.N. Yang. And for the Chinese people at that time, it was monumental that Chinese people and young people could win the Nobel Prize in physics. These two physicists became an icon for young people like myself, and we aspire to go into science. So I think it's very important that society has icons which personify the value that that society holds up, as well as serve as an inspiration for young people to emulate as role models. And I benefited from that era when these two young physicists, sadly, both of them passed away recently, that inspired my whole generation to aspire to be scientists.
And so do you intentionally try to be that kind of role model for others?
Well, do I, you mean now?
Yeah, now. Yeah.
No, I don't. I do
You're
what I do.
depriving a whole generation. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't ever expect myself to attain to quite that standard, but I do what I do.
Yeah.
And people know about what I do. And these young students, I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, so all these young students come and they ask me about, all life advice and all this. And I always encourage
Try to
them
help,
to
yeah.
study science. I said, even in the future, if you were to go into business like I did, study science.
Good.
And I always hold it out. I'm a scientist by training. And I practice that.
Well, that's great. Great. Arthur, my fellow pen person.
So I grew up in South Africa. My father's family came from Poland and my mother's from Lithuania. And they were exemplary role models. I could talk about them for a long time, but they were extraordinary people. And then I was fortunate enough to marry a physician who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, Dr. Denise Rubenstein, who was another amazing role model, confidant, advisor, and everything I did wrong she fixed up by correcting it and putting me on the right path. Anyway, we could not really live in South Africa because of apartheid. And so my family agreed that we could leave, which was very difficult. But I went to London and trained there. I had another great role model there, Sir Russell Fraser. He was head of endocrinology at Hammersmith Hospital, a New Zealander by birth, and a very accomplished endocrinologist who made many important contributions. And then when I couldn't get a job in England, after about 10 interviews, I was fortunate enough to get a position as a NIH postdoctoral fellow at the University of Chicago. And I arrived there in 1967 and was fortunate enough to link up with a great scientist role model, Dr. Donald Steiner, who discovered proinsulin, and I worked with him developing C-peptide and all its meaningful use in diabetic patients. And then I became chair there, which was a wonderful experience. And I learned a lot from another role model, Sir Hannah Gray, the president of the university, who did many wonderful things there. And then for many reasons, we moved to first New York and then Pennsylvania, to the University of Pennsylvania. And there were two additional great role models, both presidents of the university. One was Judy Roden, who was a scientist and a really accomplished leader, and the other, Amy Gutman, a political scientist. And I worked closely with these two wonderful women leaders for many, many years as we transformed the institution. So one question you might ask, what did I learn from all of these people and what did I try to put in practice myself? And it all devolved around leadership in a kind of a straightforward but I think important way. One is always recruit around you great people, particularly people who are better than you at everything, and then enjoy their greatness. Second, provide them with the wherewithal they need to be accomplished and let them do their thing without interfering. And thirdly of all, create a climate of collegiality and mutual respect, people who work together and enjoy each other's success, and make a family of an organization that mimics some of the things I talked about in the past. And that requires kind of a approach that makes everybody important, from the person cleaning your office or lab to the professors and so on. And they each have a key role to play as contributors to an institution where the whole is greater than the parts. And if one can do that, one has a good shot at making a new organization very successful. And I've been fortunate over the years to be able to be involved in such an enterprise. Thank you.
Great, great. Sir Nicholas and Dick, I want you to talk a little bit about your work, but more importantly, if you could help us with, from the time your work started. Nicholas, you started you did a lot of the basic research, and then that work was ultimately implemented into policy. Can you talk about how you all collaborated and went from, here's the evidence, and here's the policy? There's a big gap between, as you've noted, between evidence and then policy actually being implemented. Yeah, so your work, your collaboration resulted in a very important policy for the nation, for the world for that matter. Can you talk about that collaboration and how you went from the evidence to actual policy? Because as was noted, often the research is done, the evidence is there, but it doesn't get translated into policy. You all did that successessily. So can you help us? Can you help us with how you?
I might start. There were three of us.
Use the mic.
So, there were three of us in a collaboration, and we shared the same passion. And the definition of that passion really began with Godfrey Oakley, whom we're honoring posthumously. And it was his setting up a system as head of the Birth Defects Division in the CDC to determine what were the major birth defects. What were the major ones? Where were they occurring? What did we know about doing anything about them? And so out of that, we knew, and by that time I had come down, and the first thing the president of the March of Dimes said to me, said, you can keep doing your basic research, but go down and see Godfrey Oakley. So Godfrey taught me about birth defects, and so we had that system that said, this is a terrible neural tube defects, a terrible birth defect. The baby is born, the injured baby is born without a brain, or the spinal cord sticks out the lower part of the back, and everything is paralyzed below that, spina bifida. And moreover, it's really at the top of the serious birth defects. So if you think of the tragedy involved, hitting the mother when that baby is born, so it's a terrible, terrible birth defect. And then, so what can we do about it? What do we know about its origin, and how do we do something about it? How do we do it? And Nick shared this passion, and he had the wherewithal to construct a randomized controlled trial that would answer what's the relationship to what we begin to know about a relationship with folate, vitamin B9, and it's made into folic acid, which is sustained better in food. And so what do we know about that relationship? And there were hints, but we did not have definitive evidence. And if you don't have science behind what you're advocating for, you can forget it. I mean, that's a losing cause. so at that point, well, Nick came.
I think your question.
Hold the mic up.
And is it
hold
working
it up.
now?
Yes. Just hold it up to your.
I think your question relates to examples of research that were applied quite quickly and those that weren't, and what were the factors that might have influenced one or the other. Is that?
Yeah, and why were you successful? Because there's a lot of research out there that isn't in policy.
I think it's a very important question. I don't fully have the answer, but if the research is such that money could be made from it, it will be implemented quickly. If the research won't make anyone rich, but could be of enormous value to the community, it will languish. I suppose you can say, the privilege of experience of both types of research. There's still, for example, antenatal screening for birth defects. That was taken up very quickly because obstetricians had a new role. There were new tests they could apply to their patients. They could charge fees for it. So it combined the dedication that doctors have for the health and well-being of people and their financial return. Others where, for example, a simple pill taken from the age of 50 that has a combination of generic drugs could prevent 2/3 of heart attacks and strokes. But the aim there is that that pill would be incredibly cheap. So who's going to work for it? The big pharma are not going to do it because then, so it requires a national committee or commitment that is often lacking. So that's an example of one that hasn't flown. I do think that the neural tube defect example, I sort of feel when we talk about neural tube defects, we should call them severe neurological damage, because somehow that tube bit makes it sound rather technical. And it's massive. In the parts of Africa and Ethiopia where the rate of neural tube defects is over 1 in 100, and they have extremely low blood folate levels. So it's not, as people say, it's rocket science. We haven't got the mechanisms in societies that if there isn't a profit to be made, will happen. And that's a gap that we need to fill.
Yes. So, Nora, you run one of the premier research institutes in the world, or certainly around drug abuse. How do you think about the translation of what you're doing at NIH, what you're funding into, how do you think about how that gets translated? And what do you do intentionally? And I'm going to give you, after you speak, I'm going to tell you something that you all did that I think has been enormously helpful to people in public policy, of which I was one.
I mean, we have multiple strategies, so we have multi-pronged approaches. So first of all, we have to target issues that are immediate and urgent. And at the same time is how do you target interventions that are going to transform things? And you have to do both. And you have to think beyond, yes, certainly if you can make a profit, that will make things much easier. But what we want to do is improve the health of everybody. And that may not necessarily come with a profit. So the challenge there is how do you communicate it? So the way that I view it is the most impactful things that we can do in terms of prevention or therapeutics is create policies that then will make the organizations do the right thing and cover the cost, including insurances. So that is easier said than done. So the way that I view very much what we do at NIDA is what type of knowledge we can generate that others cannot ignore, even if there's not a direct profit to be made right away. Why? Because you can convey, if you do not intervene, your costs in the long term are going to be much, much greater. So it's at the essence how you transform the way that we do things. And because I work on the field of drug addiction,
I'm facing that all the time. I mean, we have stigma, we have discrimination, we criminalize people, we don't pay for medications for treatment that are addicted. And we treat actually clinicians and differently when you are dealing with a disease of addiction than when you are dealing with a disease that's not of addiction. So how do you translate the products is not just creating them, but creating a platform that will ensure that those treatments are accessible. Because otherwise, you do not have an impact in the population you're trying to serve. So you have to think things that are straight away, that are urgent, that you need to intervene, and build up the structure that would allow them to create policies that will make things much more equitable and fair for everyone.
Excellent. You all produced something called, where you laid out what the research said around some principles around good treatment. I thought it was really excellent and a real model, because for people who have to make decisions about how money is going to be spent, it's not always about the specific intervention. It's about, is what I'm funding as a policymaker, is it based on principles grounded in science? And you put that out in that format. It was enormously helpful to the field, so I just want to thank you for doing that.
Thanks.
Gerald, you have done some extraordinary work as a philanthropist and as someone who invests in companies. Talk about how you think about that and how you see that, especially as it relates to the ultimate outcome, which I heard you say, which is how do you help people get healthy?
I gather I'm a rather rare breed because the company I run being private, I can kind of blur the line between what's philanthropy and what's for-profit. I'll tell you, there's a lot of truth to what Nick just said. As much as we hate to say that is our society. And that is why if you look at pharmaceutical companies today, they love to develop drugs which are disease modifying. Lifelong usage, you don't really get cured, but it's disease modifying. If you talk about really curing diseases, not interested. That's why there are so few people or companies that invest in antibiotics, or in vaccines, because they don't make money. So I'm privileged in that I'm private, I'm long-term, I can take risks, and I can blur that distinction between what's philanthropy and what's for-profit. Number two, having been trained in science, I can also combine the science with the financial capital. So there really is a need for that. People that have capital, like many philanthropists, they don't grasp the science. And they get sold a bill of goods, like, ooh, this would really be good. Well, and then there are people, who have great science, but they have no money. So somehow you have to marry the science with the money. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Some of that could be done through funding agencies. Some of it could be done through philanthropy, what the Gates Foundation has done, or as Nikki and I, we used to serve at the Wellcome Trust, organizations like that, they can bring science and finance together to develop something that has long-term and great impact. So I feel there really is a need for the two to come together. How do we do that? That's another long story, which I shouldn't take up more time.
That's okay. That's great. Arthur, when you arrived at Penn at the medical school, it was struggling financially. It was having some challenges, and you really helped to build it into a premier medical school in the nation. What is it that you saw that maybe others may have missed in terms of what needed to get done? How did you think about that work? What guided you in terms of your approach to building Penn into what it is today?
many things, of course. When I came, we were in pretty bad shape, and so the idea was, what should we do to work together to make things better in the long run? And that required a lot of people working hard and a lot of belief in our plan. I think the most important thing is we developed a very straightforward but simple strategic plan which concentrated on translational research. I was a great believer that basic science research is critically important, but if you do it at the great depths that needed, it can be done at the Rockefeller Institute and others. And we needed to do basic science and then clinical science and clinical research that was science related to patients and improving the lives of patients and their families. And so we all embraced that as a community. And then we applied the principles I mentioned a little earlier, recruiting great people, providing them with as much wherewithal to do their work, and then to celebrate their successes, which sometimes and often does take a very long time. So a key word I would say is patience and belief in these people rather than immediate demands. At Penn, it's paid off enormously. Who would have thought that successes like mRNA and the COVID vaccine from Weinstein and Carrico, CAR T cells from CART June, gene therapy from a variety of people, including Wilson, transplantation from people like Barker, now islets, which are now being done all over the world, and stem cells. I could go on, but each of these required 20 or 25 years of patience, investment, support, encouragement, and so on. But if you believed in the quality of these people, many of them would be successful, although some, in the way science is, would not. But even if some of these, which I've mentioned, come to fruition, look at what an impact it's made on patients, their families, and diseases. So it's a strategy that requires a lot of moving parts, and you also have to be very lucky, I'd say, to be successful.
Great. So we are out of time, but I want to give each of you 30 seconds. And you got to stick to 30 seconds because we're out of time. We have, I know we always have early career scientists and folks in the audience. To your point, Arthur, about the persistence, is there a piece of advice that you could give folks that or early in their career about how they can have an impact on the work that have an impact in the work that they're doing? Yeah, we go down.
Surround yourself.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Please.
Surround yourself with great people and give them the opportunity to do their work, and don't get in their way.
I like that one. Okay, Gerald.
More to the funders, I think we need funding allocated to support young scientists, where the minds are fresh. A big mistake is to support people that have success, already, and say, oh, look at their track record. Of course, fund them,
Right.
That's the least risky thing. I would say take risks, fund the young people.
All right. Nora.
I'm going to answer to the question, what do I tell the young scientists? And what I tell my postdocs and any students is, trust your brain. Ultimately, you bring something into the scientific operation that is unique. So don't just repeat what the others. So I actually empower them to think differently, to be daring, to be actually bold. Because if you don't think that I can do this, you'll never do it.
Great. Sir Nicholas.
Follow
Mike.
the wise words of...
Hold the mic up. Hold the mic up.
Sorry. Is that better?
Yeah, much better.
I should swallow it.
Well, we got a lot of physicians in here, so I think you'll be okay.
Of Dr. Chan. He says he's a rare breed. He's a very special breed, and we need more like him.
Great. And Dick, you get the last word.
I think as you go along in life and you find something that bugs you, you know should be changed, and you develop a passion, find a way to get at it. And it might be small, but find a way to get at it. But when you get at it, let it be passion driven by intelligence. And the intelligence would be scientific, a scientific basis.
That is a great last word. Can you all give a warm round of applause to this fantastic group of people?
All right, didn't I tell you that each panel, you would start to stand just a little bit straighter, you would start to feel a little bit better about the state of the world? I can tell you that I do. I definitely do, because I told you when we started this discussion this evening that the state of the world was sometimes challenging. But then you sit on a stage with folks who have saved literally hundreds of thousands to millions of lives. How extraordinary. All right, it is my turn now to turn to this year's recipient of the Edwin C. Whitehead Award for Medical Research Advocacy. And this year, one of our recipients is Senator Chris Coons. Senator Coons has represented Delaware since 2010. He's been an advocate for medical and health research that entire time. Now, there's a whole list here of the bills that he has co-sponsored on behalf of patients and on behalf of the scientific community to make the work of the National Institutes of Health, the work of the Centers for Disease Control, the work of the FDA better. But I'm going to tell you that just, as a member, he's a member of the Appropriations Committee, which obviously has enormous influence on appropriations and funding. But I have to tell you that some people have influence not because of the title they have, but because of what they say, what they do, how they lead. And Senator Coons has been doing that on behalf of biomedical research, and actually on behalf of foreign policy, on behalf of his state, and on behalf of the country for his entire tenure in the Senate. And I'm just so incredibly proud and so incredibly excited that he is our Edwin C. Whitehead Award winner for this year. Senator Coons.
You're going to hand me an award. You'll get it too. Lesson number 1, senators can't be trusted to carry crystal objects. Well, good evening, everybody. How are you? I hope you just enjoyed that remarkable panel of some of the giants of research and science. Some of their insights, some of their encouragement, some of their advice. And I am thrilled to spend a little bit of time with you, and I am so grateful for this recognition and this award. So to Research America, to Mary Woolley, who's also receiving a Lifetime Leadership Award, to Sudeep for the introduction and for your leadership at AAAS, to all the other honorees, and to Senator Britt, who will succeed me in a moment here with a video. I believe deeply in science. I grew up in a community of DuPont researchers and near a university, the University of Delaware, that really drove research and innovation in my home community, in my home state. We're in a tough time for science, and I just wanted to spend a little bit of time in a room full of people who believe in science. It's a good thing. I will never forget in 2017 when there was a whole bunch of different marches of different kinds. There was the Women's March, right? There was a march for science. There were folks wearing their white lab coats, right? 2, 4, 6, 8, what do we, right? Double-blind research and peer-reviewed publication. It's hard to come up with really great chants for the March on Science. And it was so fun watching all these researchers getting way out of their comfort zone, actually marching. But the reality is, science doesn't care if you believe in it or not. What it does care about is whether you invest in it, whether you invest in young scientists, whether you invest in the communities that facilitate research, whether you invest in innovation. So the tagline of Research America, discovery, innovation, health, is a reminder that we advance the health not just of the United States, of course, but of the whole world by investing robustly and sustainably over a long period of time in the research enterprise of the United States. I'll give one other observation about the panel you just heard. The United States has been the world's preeminent research nation because we have embraced people from all over the world, whether from Eastern Europe or South Africa, whether from China or elsewhere. We have made our nation healthier, more prosperous, more secure by throwing wide open the doors of immigration to those who would come here as students or graduate students, as physicians, as researchers, as business entrepreneurs, and we should not step back from that commitment. I was frankly pretty depressed a year ago as the appropriator who had written the bill that funded USAID and all of its global public health inventions, investments, innovations, and care. It was a rough couple of months. And DOGE was also tearing up university research, crushing overhead rates, canceling grants, throwing careers into chaos, taking away hope that had been built up over years of research for all sorts of different disease groups. And bluntly, here a year later, I am dramatically more encouraged because the president's proposed 40% cut to NIH, the proposed closure of several of the critical institutes, the cancellation of billions of dollars of years of research, while not wholly reversed or rejected, the funding cuts have been. In fact, NIH got an increase of $400 million this year. Look, in my home state of Delaware, that's made a real difference. For the University of Delaware, for the community of research, it has a measurable quantitative impact on economic activity, on research, on healthcare, and I know that's repeated all over our country. So just know that I am honored by this award, that I appreciate it deeply. But at the end of the day, I do this for the families and the people who are impacted by the quality of the healthcare you're able to deliver, by the innovations and inventions and discoveries that companies large and small in the private sector help bring to scale, by the patient advocacy groups who visit me week in and week out in our office here in Washington and at home in Delaware. My best friend, a physician of 30 years, the head of pediatric orthopedics at CHOP, currently has a rapidly advancing and terminal case of ALS. And the ability to talk with him about the latest research and our investments in ALS and the things that we're doing to make sure that a next generation will not have this awful, crippling disease is one of the few bright spots we have. His faith is strong. His family is supporting him. He's operated on more than 7,000 children in what's been a remarkable career in public service. But as we both together look at this fairly grim prognosis, it is a reminder to me that when we can give good news to a whole community of people impacted by one disease, that's good news for the world. My father, my uncle, my pastor, all died of pancreatic cancer. And a dear friend of mine from service in the Senate, Ben Sass, former senator, former university president, is in his last months, almost certainly from pancreatic cancer, and has done a remarkable job of speaking out publicly about what this journey is like. But recently I had a visit from a medical researcher from Hopkins who was telling me about some significant breakthroughs in the KRAS gene mutation that's allowing for earlier detection, that may allow for different therapeutic progress in the future. It won't change Ben's trajectory, but it changes his sense of hope about the future and his family's sense of gratitude for everything that we do on behalf of our nation. Know at the end of the day that of all the little pieces of crystal that sit on various parts of my office, this one means an immense amount to me because it reflects the hope, the determination, the genius, and the hard work of generations of American scientists. You had me at hello. I believe in research, and I will keep fighting with you and for you to my very last breath. Thank you.
please welcome to the stage Research America Board Member and President Emeritus of Wayne State University, Dr. Roy Wilson.
Wow. I'd like to thank the panelists again for sharing your thoughts with us. You've given us, me and our guests, a lot to ponder, and more importantly, new ways to think about our ongoing efforts at advocacy. There is one additional honoree who is an incredibly impactful advocate who could not be with us today. We had the honor just now of hearing from Senator Coons, our Edward C. Whitehead Award winner for medical research advocacy, but he has a fellow honoree, the Honorable Katie Boyd Britt, U.S. Senator from Alabama, who was unable to join us tonight. But we do have a brief video from Senator Britt to share with you now.
Hi, Senator Katie Britt here. While I wish I could join you all this evening, I want to thank Research America for this tremendous honor. It is a privilege to accept the Edwin C. Whitehead Award for Medical Research Advocacy, an award that represents a commitment to transforming research and to better health for all Americans. Since I started in the U.S. Senate in 2023, I have been committed to supporting life-saving and life-changing medical research for families in Alabama and across our great country. As a member of the Appropriations Committee, I've worked to ensure that the National Institutes of Health remain the gold standard for biomedical research here at home and across the world. Every dollar invested in research fuels discovery, supports high-skilled jobs, and accelerates breakthroughs that can deliver life-changing results for patients. I've been proud to champion legislation to strengthen youth mental health research, advance diabetes research, and support critical research focused on maternal care and reducing maternal mortality. Medical research is fundamental to America's strength, and I am proud to be a partner as we fuel American innovation that opens doors for funding cures. Thank you again for this recognition and for your advocacy. It is an honor to be a champion for medical research in the U.S. Senate. God bless.
Thank you, Senators Britt and Coons, for championing science and supporting medical and research progress. Thank you. Now, I'm pleased to welcome Sudep back to the stage.
Thank you. Again, I think I'm feeling much taller after the remarks of both members of the Senate and to both of those panels. But now I think I'm going to be able to stand up perfectly straight, because now we're going to get to one of our final acts of this evening, which is, it is my great privilege to introduce somebody who doesn't need an introduction, our leader at Research America, Mary Woolley. She's been with Research America almost since its beginning, almost. Not from the very beginning, almost. And she's taken the organization from a handful of dedicated advocates to the point today where it's one of the nation's premier research advocacy organizations. And her steady hand and stewardship have lifted the research and innovation ecosystem in this country. It's changed it. It's changed it to where advocacy isn't a dirty word. It used to be. Now, she is stepping down from the helm in a few weeks. And that is something that I'm still coming to grips with as chair of the organization. But her impact is going to be felt for years to come. And we're going to show a video here in a second, but before we do that, I'm going to go away from these scripted remarks for a second and just say something, which is that, I have known Mary for over 25 years. And I have watched as the work of doubling the NIH turned into the work of getting $10 billion in the stimulus package in 2010. I've watched as we fought off challenges that came from, I can't remember what the words were related to appropriations, where you cut it just by across the board. And I'm an appropriator, oh my gosh. But there are words for that. But I've watched in the last year as the community came together, really rallied. And many of the organizations that are in this room have led, have led to ensure that appropriations, at least, were protected for the science funding agencies, for the National Institutes of Health, for the National Science Foundation. And all of us know that that is not a victory. That is a rearguard action. All of us know that there's so much more to do. All of us know that science continues to face challenges. We know that, and I can say this because I don't work for the government, the National Institutes of Health hasn't let out a grant, has an NCI, all year long. We know that there are challenges still out there. And I got to tell you that Mary Woolley has given us the path, the framework for advocacy, the path and the framework for how we fight these battles, for how we advocate for science, for how we take the amazing science that's been up here on stage and turn it into motion and policy and action and implementation and life. And that is a pretty extraordinary thing to do as the leader of a small nonprofit organization. And yet, that is exactly what she's done. I said earlier that influence doesn't come from titles. Influence comes from the way you influence folks, the way you turn people to change the way they think and feel and do. And that's what Mary Woolley's done. And I'm so proud to be her friend and to be in this position of chair at this moment in time. So now we're going to watch that video about Mary.
Over 35 years, you've inspired countless volunteers, researchers, and advocates to step forward and to help build a healthier future for all. Every time I'm with Mary, I'm inspired by how she elevates the conversation and how she brings people together to drive meaningful progress.
And she did it in a way that was always remarkable. Hi, Mary. This is your old friend Bill. We've been working on this for a long time. Sometimes people say, why did they wait so long to retire, even after 35 years? I keep wondering, why did you retire so soon, just when we need you more than ever?
How does somebody become the trusted voice, truly, for the nation in science and health research policy? Mary, your leadership, the fact that I had the privilege of serving on your board for over a decade, the fact that you have become an esteemed colleague, and more than that, as with many others, but with me, a deep personal friend, gives me the great joy to know that in the years ahead, I am going to be able to remain engaged with your brilliant mind and your extraordinary generous spirit and heart and compassion for what is right and good in our society. I look forward to these years, Mary.
Among the notable accomplishments that Mary has is the ability to form genuine relationships with a variety of people. She is an excellent spokesperson for science. She's a great educator of the value of science as well as the values of medicine.
I met Mary when I became the NIH director in 2002. She was one of the first person to visit with me. I think she is an all-around player. She's not just a quarterback. She plays every position in the ecosystem that's possible to play and with an outstanding record. So I don't think there's anyone that I have encountered in the advocacy community that has been more influential than Mary for me.
I met Mary at the very beginning, so about 35 years ago. And I met her because my father is Jack Whitehead, Edwin C. Whitehead, and he founded Research America. And he was just crazy about her. He thought that she was really going to be the right person to lead Research America into the future. I think that, her smarts are really a big piece of it, in her strategic sense. She's very planful. She's very deliberate.
And she has built a foundation in Research America over 35 years to support multiple voices led by her voice. Congratulations, Mary.
I always viewed Mary as a model of great leadership, a person who will be sorely missed, and a friend who will always be cherished.
Congratulations, Mary. Well deserved.
I'm personally so grateful to you for your warm friendship and for your bold leadership. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve on your board. Thank you for your extraordinary service, and congratulations on your retirement.
I wish you the best for your future, hoping that you will not disappear, but stay with us, provide us with your wisdom as you've always have, and your leadership. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you for all that you have done. Bravo to you. You've given a great gift to all of us. We really appreciate it. Huge congratulations and thanks.
So with that, please welcome to the stage my dear friend, winner of the John Edward Porter Legacy Award, and an incredibly consequential leader, Mary Wilson.
Wow. Sort of have to pull myself together here. I want to start by celebrating, but I also should tell you in advance that I'm going to say some hard and serious things too. But let's do the celebrating. I want to add to those who've received awards today, those who came before you in receiving awards, and those who have been members of the Research America Board in the past as well as those today, civil servants today and in the past, and fabulous colleagues of mine and staff at Research America in the past and today. Please join me in applauding everyone. Well, now, on to my brilliant career. It's a joke. As you've heard, I will retire this year after 35 years at Research America. So I thought this would be a good time for a confession. I was wrong, and you were right. For all those years, I argued that scientists needed to become public advocates, that is, advocates for science in the general life of the nation, our public life, the life we share with one another day to day. I argued that scientists should be public advocates in the formal sense of writing letters, speaking at public forums, or meeting with elected and appointed officials. I also argued that scientists can be very powerful advocates in informal ways, because science has, for far too long, stood apart from our daily life. It's been aloof, abstract, remote. And because it is remote, it can become intimidating and even frightening. I argued that scientists could advocate for science just by not being remote. Scientists could advocate by being visible, identifying as scientists in coffee shops, soccer fields, and for the person sitting next to you on your next flight. For scientists to be visible in local communities is to normalize science, to bring it within reach, to make it feel real. This is profound advocacy. And I argued that science needed this advocacy. Well, I was wrong, but you were right. I wasn't wrong about advocacy. For scientists to make themselves visible is indeed advocacy of great power. But I was wrong that science needed this visibility. At least until now, science hasn't needed it. Science kept on being pretty well supported by public funds, by industry and philanthropy, sometimes very well supported, even without the kind of advocacy that I had pleaded for. Now, to be sure, I did manage to persuade a few scientists to become exceptional public advocates, and I am grateful for their work. But not a lot. Mostly, scientists has resisted the call to advocacy. Still, science didn't wither. Science didn't need the advocacy of scientists because others took on the task. Hundreds, thousands of people set themselves to speak on behalf of science, and they did so with passion and conviction, great skill. I was and am honored at Research America to work with some of the truly great advocates for science. Mary Lasker, Paul Rogers, Jack Whitehead, John Whitehead, Susan Whitehead, John Edward Porter. I have to say his name again. John Edward Porter, that I would receive an award in your name is unspeakably important to me. Anne Lurie, Bill Novelli, Herb Pardis, Isidore Rosenfeld, Gordon Gund, Roy Blunt, Lou Sullivan, George Vredenberg, Jed Manicherian, the Staglin family, and many, many more. Some of you sitting here, some I named and some others. I can't name you all today. Thank you. Science could thrive because of you all, even though most scientists themselves largely kept away from advocacy. But that was then, and this is now, and I know I'm not wrong now. The Prime Minister of Canada's recent speech at Davos has been so often cited that it's become a cliche. But I've never been afraid of cliches, so here comes Mark Carney at you one more time. In speaking of the world order in 2026, Carney said, quote, "This is a rupture, not a transition," unquote. So I say the same to you about science and politics in 2026. This is a rupture, not a transition. Carney used language that was meant to shock, and it did. He said that for 80 years, the world has believed in a rule-based international order, but that this belief was a fiction, a comforting fiction, a reassuring fiction, but a fiction nonetheless. 2026, he said, marks, quote, "the end of a pleasant fiction and the beginning of a harsh reality," unquote. And I say the same to you today about science and politics. 2026 is the end of 80 years of a pleasant fiction and the beginning of a harsh reality. Of course, I don't mean that science is fiction. Scientists throughout the world and the US, and US scientists in particular, have done astonishing, incredible work. We heard about it today. Literally incredible. The achievements of science have blasted through the boundaries of what, not long ago, we would never have thought possible. And these achievements have contributed to the public good in ways that are beyond measure. No, of course, the achievements of science are not fiction. The pleasant fiction all these years has been that the achievement of science has had nothing to do with politics. Science has long told itself the fiction that the work of science has no connections to politics and that scientists themselves should keep clear of politics. Now, everyone knew, of course, that science depended on politics for its lifeblood. But it was pleasant to believe that the link between science and politics was no more than the decisions made behind closed doors by a handful of power brokers, perhaps influenced by those I named a few minutes ago. But meanwhile, the link between science and politics could be minimized, sterilized, ignored. But now this is a rupture, not a transition. This is the beginning of a harsh reality. The link between science and politics was never so nominal as the fiction presented. But the past doesn't matter now. The harsh reality of today is that the link between science and politics has exploded into our daily lives because politics itself has exploded into our lives. What has changed forever is that day-to-day politics has leapt from our TV screens into the palms of our hands. What has changed forever is that politics is happening whenever someone opens a news feed or a social media thread or starts doom scrolling. What has changed forever is that politics in this country happens not 1 million times a day, but many billions of times a day. It used to be that politics was an ordinary part of our everyday lives. Today, politics is an ordinary part of our every second lives. And whether science likes it or not, when politics became an every second phenomenon, so did the link between politics and science. When science leapt into the palm of our hands, when politics leapt into the palm of our hands, it dragged science with it. Every second of every day, science is in the middle of the nation's combustible politics. Whether it's praised or damned, whether it's understood or falsified, whether it is supported or weaponized, science is now inseparable from politics. Every second, billions of times a day. The pleasant fiction of the past allowed scientists to remain as spectators. Well, the pleasant fiction is over. The harsh reality is that in the age of every second politics, science is on the political field. Today, science is paying the price of having distanced itself from everyday life. Today, to thrive in the world of every second politics, science needs to be part of our shared life, our common life, the life we live in coffee shops and cyber fields and holiday dinner tables. And only scientists can make this happen. I was wrong before, but I'm not wrong now. The answer to every second politics is for scientists to be advocates. The answer to doom scrolling is for scientists to be visible in those town halls, coffee shops, and soccer fields. The answer to invisibility is more scientists like those who organized the McClintock letters. The answer to the weaponizing of science is for scientists to turn to that person next to you on the plane who asks what you do and say, I work for you. So I'll be there for you. I may be leaving Research America, but I'm not leaving the playing field. The reality we face may be harsh, but it is no means discouraging. On the contrary, we can make that reality amazing. Imagine the possibilities. Imagine what can happen when advocacy by scientists leads this country to see science not as abstract, but as real. Science not as intimidating, but as human and humane. Science not as remote, but as centered at the very core of the life that we share together. A life of achieving aspirations we all share together. Imagine the power for science that this advocacy will unleash. I can't wait to see it. Thank you.
You know, I started off this evening not feeling very optimistic, feeling kind of down. And every step of the way, every panel, every awardee, everything leading up to the end of the evening has lifted me a little bit straighter, a little bit taller, to go out and fight more battles and to make sure that science delivers for everybody. And that's what I hope every one of you will be doing as well. And now let's go enjoy each other out in the Great Hall. Thank you, everybody.